Hi Reddit, I'm Emily26, and I never thought I'd be here sharing my story. But after everything that's happened, I need to let it out. From the moment I met my mother-in-law, Carol, she made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her son, Alex. I still remember our first meeting. Alex brought me to dinner at her house, excited to introduce me to his family. Carol greeted me with a forced smile and a handshake that felt more like a dismissal. "She's cute," Carol said to Alex, as if I wasn't standing right there. Over the years, her disdain only grew. Carol never missed an opportunity to remind me that Alex could have done better. You know, she'd say during family gatherings, Alex's ex, Jessica, is doing really well now. She just bought a house. Such a smart girl. Alex always brushed her comments off, assuring me that I was the only one who mattered. But deep down it hurt. Despite Carol's constant jabs, Alex and I built a happy life together. We got married, bought a small house, and even started talking about having kids. But then Alex got sick. It started with small symptoms, fatigue, headaches, and a persistent cough. At first, we thought it was just stress or a lingering cold, but as the weeks went on, his condition worsened. Doctors ran test after test, but the results were inconclusive. Alex was put on medication and told to rest, but nothing seemed to help. Through it all, Carol hovered like a vulture, constantly questioning my every decision. "Are you sure you're taking care of him properly?" she'd ask. "Maybe you should let me handle his meals. I know what he likes." One night, after a particularly grueling day at the hospital, Carol cornered me in the hallway. "This is your fault," she hissed. "He was perfectly healthy before he married you." I was too exhausted to argue, but her words stuck with me. Over the next few months, Alex's condition deteriorated rapidly. He lost weight, struggled to breathe, and spent more time in the hospital than at home. Despite everything, he stayed optimistic, always reassuring me that we'd get through it together. But we didn't. Alex passed away on a quiet Sunday morning, with me holding his hand. After Alex's funeral, I thought the worst was behind me. The grief was unbearable, and every day felt like I was wading through quicksand. But I had no idea that Carol, my mother-in-law, was about to make my life even harder. It started small. A few weeks after the funeral, I noticed people in town treating me differently. The cashier at the grocery store, who used to chat with me about Alex, suddenly went silent when I walked up. My neighbor, who'd always been friendly, started avoiding eye contact. I brushed it off at first, chalking it up to people not knowing what to say to a grieving widow. But then the whispers started. One day, as I was coming home from the pharmacy, my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Green, stopped me on the driveway. "Emily," she said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, though her tone made me uneasy. She glanced around nervously. "I heard, well, Carol's been saying some things about Alex's death." My stomach twisted. "What things?" Mrs. Green hesitated, then said, "She's telling people you poisoned him." I stared at her, my heart racing. "What?" "I didn't believe it, of course," she said quickly. "But you should know what's being said." I thanked her and went inside, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking, and my mind was racing. Poison? Carol was accusing me of poisoning Alex. I knew she hated me, but this was beyond anything I'd imagined. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself the rumors would die down on their own, that people would see them for the baseless lies they were. But Carol didn't let up. She started posting on Facebook, vague but pointed messages about justice for Alex and evil people who hide behind fake smiles. She never mentioned me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The posts escalated over the next few weeks. She wrote about suspicious circumstances surrounding Alex's death, hinted that she'd spoken to the police, and even claimed she had evidence. The whispers around town turned into full-blown gossip. People I'd known for years started avoiding me, and even some of Alex's friends reached out with uncomfortable questions. "Emily, I hate to ask this, one of them said over the phone, but is it true? Did you have something to do with Alex's death? The betrayal stung. Are you serious? I snapped. You've known me for years. Do you really think I'm capable of something like that? It's not that I believe her, he said quickly, but Carol's saying she is proof. I just needed to hear it from you. I hung up, feeling more isolated than ever. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at a photo of Alex. What am I supposed to do? I whispered. For weeks, I tried to stay silent, hoping the storm would pass. But it was clear now that Carol wouldn't stop until she completely destroyed my reputation. The breaking point came when I received a letter from the local police department. We received an anonymous tip regarding suspicious circumstances in your husband's death, it read. We would like to ask you a few questions as part of our routine follow-up. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. Carol hadn't just spread rumors, she'd gone to the police. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Sarah. She's accusing me of murder, I said, my voice trembling. Sarah sighed. Emily, this is serious. We need to act quickly. If Carol is spreading false accusations, we can file a defamation claim. But first, I'll contact the police and provide them with the medical records from Alex's case. The medical records showed that Alex had died from a rare and aggressive illness. There was no evidence of foul play, but even with the truth on my side, the damage was already done. Sarah sent a cease and desist letter to Carol, demanding that she stop making defamatory statements and retract her previous claims. For a moment, it seemed to work. The Facebook post disappeared, and the gossip around town started to die down. I thought I could finally start moving forward, but then, a week later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, 2 police officers were standing on my porch. Ma'am, one of them said, we have a warrant to search your house. We've received additional claims regarding your husband's death. I felt my heart drop. Additional claims? I asked. The officer nodded. We're just following protocol. You're not being charged with anything at this time. They searched my house for over an hour, going through drawers, cabinets, and even Alex's old belongings. Of course, they found nothing, but the humiliation was unbearable. After they left, I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the mess they'd made. I felt defeated, like Carol had won. But then I remembered something Sarah had said during our first meeting. The only way to stop a bully is to stand up to them. I wasn't going to let Carol ruin my life. The next day, I met with Sarah and told her I was ready to take legal action. We're filing a defamation lawsuit, I said. She's not getting away with this. Sarah nodded. It's the right move. She's gone too far. Filing the lawsuit wasn't easy. It meant reliving every painful moment of Alex's illness and death, gathering evidence to prove that Carol's claims were baseless. But I knew it was the only way to protect myself. We submitted the lawsuit along with evidence of her defamatory statements, screenshots of her Facebook posts, statements from neighbors, and even a recording of a phone call where she admitted she had no actual proof. When Carol was served with the lawsuit, she tried to play the victim. I was just trying to get justice for my son, she told anyone who would listen. Emily is attacking me because she feels guilty. But the evidence was stacked against her, and as the court date approached, it became clear that she didn't have a leg to stand on. The day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom feeling nervous but determined. Carol sat at the defendant's table, looking defiant. Sarah presented our case clearly and confidently, showing the judge exactly how Carol's lies had damaged my reputation and caused emotional distress. When it was Carol's turn to speak, she stumbled over her words, unable to provide any concrete evidence to back up her claims. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering Carol to pay damages and issue a public apology. As I left the courtroom, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I'd won, but it didn't erase the pain Carol had caused, or bring Alex back. The apology Carol posted on Facebook felt hollow, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd stood up for myself and cleared my name. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. After the court ruling, I expected Carol to back off, but she didn't. Her Facebook apology was barely up for a week before she deleted it. And while she wasn't spreading outright lies anymore, she made sure everyone knew how unfair she thought the verdict was. She's punishing me for grieving. She told one of Alex's cousins, who later texted me about it. I lost my son, and now I'm being treated like a criminal. I wanted to ignore her, but the damage she'd caused was still fresh. Even though I'd won the lawsuit, I couldn't erase the months of whispers, the humiliation of the police search, or the friends I'd lost because they believed her lies. But I wasn't going to let Carol dictate my life anymore. The first step was moving. I'd lived in the house Alex and I shared for years, and while it held good memories, it was also a constant reminder of everything Carol had put me through. I decided to sell it and use the money to start fresh in a new town. Packing up the house was harder than I expected. Every room held pieces of Alex. His books on the shelves, his favorite mug in the kitchen, the jacket he always left draped over the chair in our bedroom. I spent hours going through his things, deciding what to keep and what to donate. Some items, like the mug and a few of his favorite shirts, I couldn't bear to part with. Others, like old paperwork and clothes I hadn't seen him wear in years, went into donation bags. While packing, I found a box of letters Alex had written to me during the early years of our relationship. Reading them was like hearing his voice again. "You make me feel like the luckiest guy in the world," one letter said. "No matter what happens, I'll always be on your side." I sat on the floor, clutching the letter, and cried for what felt like hours. For so long, I'd let Carol overshadow Alex's memory with her bitterness and lies. But reading his words reminded me of the man he truly was, kind, loving, and fiercely protective of the people he cared about. By the time the movers came, I felt lighter. Leaving the house wasn't just a logistical decision. It was a symbolic one. I was leaving behind the pain, the accusations, and the toxic hold Carol had on my life. My new home was a small apartment in a quiet town about an hour away. It wasn't as big or as fancy as the house, but it felt like a fresh start. I started focusing on myself for the first time in years. I took up painting, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. I joined a local book club and made new friends who didn't know anything about my past. One day, I got a call from Mark, one of Alex's childhood friends. "Emily, how are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm doing better," I said honestly. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "Listen, I wanted to apologize. I should have known better than to believe anything Carol said about you. Alex would have been furious if he knew what she was doing." Hearing that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Mark had been one of the people who doubted me during Carol's smear campaign, and while his apology didn't undo the hurt, it was a step toward healing. We ended up talking for hours, reminiscing about Alex and all the good times we'd shared. It reminded me that, despite everything, there were still people who remembered Alex for who he really was, and who valued the relationship we'd had. As time went on, I began to rebuild my life in earnest. I started therapy, which helped me work through the anger and grief I'd been carrying. My therapist encouraged me to let go of the parts of the past I couldn't change and focus on the future I wanted to create. I also found a new job at a nonprofit organization that supported families dealing with chronic illnesses. It felt meaningful to help others navigate the kind of challenges Alex and I had faced together. One day, while scrolling through social media, I saw a post from Carol. She was ranting about how she was cut off from people she used to consider family and how certain people had ruined her reputation. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, but I stopped. Carol was stuck in her bitterness, and engaging with her would only drag me back into her toxic world. I closed the app and went back to painting. By the time the anniversary of Alex's death came around, I felt stronger than I had in years. I visited his favorite park, bringing a bouquet of his favorite flowers, sunflowers, and sat by the lake, thinking about everything we'd been through together. "I hope you're proud of me," I whispered. "I'm finally moving forward, Alex." As I left the park that day, I realized that I wasn't just moving on from Carol. I was reclaiming my life. The lies, the court battles, and the pain she caused were just chapters in my story. But they didn't define me. I was ready to write the rest of my story on my own terms. In the months that followed, I continued rebuilding my life one step at a time. The small apartment I'd moved into started to feel like home. I decorated it with things that made me happy: bright throw pillows, plants, and a cozy reading corner where I spent hours lost in books. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when Alex and I first got married, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. One day, while sorting through a box of Alex's things, I found a small journal I'd forgotten about. It was something he'd kept during the early days of his illness, filled with thoughts and reflections. I flipped through the pages, smiling at his familiar handwriting. One entry stood out. "I'm so grateful for Emily. She's my anchor in all of this." I don't know how I got so lucky. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read those words. It was a reminder that, no matter what Carol had said, Alex knew the truth. That truth became my guiding light. Whenever doubts crept in or I felt the shadow of Carol's accusations lingering, I reminded myself of Alex's love and trust. I started therapy again, diving deeper into the pain I'd carried, not just from Carol, but from the loss of Alex and the life we'd built together. My therapist helped me see that my anger toward Carol, while justified, was holding me back. "Letting go doesn't mean excusing her behavior," she said. "It means freeing yourself from the hold it has on you." Slowly, I began to let go. It wasn't easy. Some days, the bitterness would resurface, especially when I thought about the police search or the friends I'd lost because of Carol's lies. But each time, I reminded myself that holding on to that anger only gave her more power over my life. I also started connecting with new people, friends who didn't know Carol or the mess she'd caused. They got to know me for who I was, not for the rumors that had once surrounded me. One of those new friends, Sarah from my book club, invited me to a dinner party at her house. It was the first time in years that I felt comfortable being part of a social gathering. Over wine and laughter, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't the same woman who'd felt crushed under the weight of Carol's accusations. I'd grown stronger, more resilient. As I left that night, Sarah hugged me and said, "I'm so glad you came, Emily. You're an amazing person." For the first time, I truly believed it. About a year after the court case, I got a letter in the mail. The return address was Carol's. At first, I wanted to throw it away. I didn't want to let her back into my life, even in the form of a letter. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short note. "Emily, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to say I'm sorry. I let my grief turn into anger, and I took it out on you. It wasn't fair. Alex loved you, and I should have respected that. I hope you're doing well. Carol." I stared at the note for a long time, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to crumple it up and throw it away. But another part of me, the part that had been learning to let go, felt a small sense of closure. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on the future. I started volunteering at a local hospice, helping families navigate the challenges of caring for loved ones with terminal illnesses. It felt meaningful, like a way to honor Alex's memory while making a difference in the lives of others. I also began painting more seriously, eventually showcasing my work at a local art fair. It was terrifying to put myself out there, but the response was overwhelming. People connected with the emotion in my pieces, and for the first time, I felt like I was turning my pain into something beautiful. As the second anniversary of Alex's death approached, I returned to his favorite park. This time, I didn't bring flowers. Instead, I brought a small canvas I'd painted, a vibrant scene of sunflowers under a golden sky. I sat by the lake, holding the canvas, and spoke to Alex in my mind. "Thank you," I thought, "for loving me, for believing in me, and for giving me the strength to keep going." I placed the canvas on a bench by the water, letting it go as a tribute to him. Walking away, I felt lighter. I wasn't leaving Alex behind. I was carrying him with me, in the memories we'd shared and the lessons I'd learned from our time together. I'd fought through grief, lies, and betrayal to reclaim my life. And now, I was ready to move forward, knowing that I deserved happiness, peace, and love. This was my story. And for the first time in years, it felt like it was truly mine to write.